afternoon, everybody, and welcome to what we now quite fondly like to call the world-famous debates. I suspect that might be a slight exaggeration, but certainly since year one, when we had our first debate, and those of you who were there might remember Roy Lilly taking on Public Health England single-handedly, they have been quite notable. And what we've always been pleased to get is some contention, because the main contributor to this debate is yourselves. So we have four people who will introduce the scene, but we're very much looking forward to you putting your views. Now, building on the success of the mini debate yesterday, where we had a vote pre and post, we're going to rather riskily try the same thing again. On your chair, you should have had a small little keypad attached to an orange lanyard. And what that should have on it is a series of keys, but we're only really bothered about keys A, B, C, and D. So you'll remember the matter of the debate is preventing childhood obesity, whose responsibility? And we have four choices written there. We have policy and policy makers, professionals, family environment, or technology. Now, I think most of you would probably say, oh, it's all of those. And if we had a multi-guess question, you'd probably go for E, which would be all of them. But what we want you to do is to go for the priority. And for the purposes of this debate, all the speakers understand also that they'll be a little bit more polarized than they may necessarily believe. So, yesterday, they had a test vote where you had to say, what's your favorite color? We don't need a test vote. We are an extremely intelligent audience on day two, so we're going to go straight for the big one. So if you could we have the question up, please? So, to remind you, if you think the most important factor in preventing childhood obesity, the most important responsibility lies with policymakers, you press A, professionals B, family environment C, and technology D. And we will repeat the exercise at the end. Okay, do you want to get pressing now, please? It's the nearest to reality TV I'll ever get. I'm told there are 200 plus people here, but when we get to 200, we'll stop. There's a few latecomers. I think you're done. We're going to call it a day. Okay, let's see where we got to on the combined vote, if we could, please. Okay, so policy, professionals, family, and technology. Well, as I said to mine, Google shares are dependent on him getting that number of votes up. So that's quite a task, clearly. Okay, great stuff. We will do that again. If we go back to the hold slide now. So I'm going to very briefly introduce all four speakers at the start so we don't break the rhythm of the subsequent discussion. So our first speaker is the Right Honourable Keith Vaz, MP, who some of you may remember spoke very well last year at our conference, and it's very good to see him back again. He's the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Diabetes, was first elected in June 1987 and subsequently re-elected as an MP 7 times. He was the first person of Asian origin to sit in the House of Commons since 1922. He was Britain's Minister for Europe under Tony Blair, but we're not going to talk about Europe especially today, and served as chairman of the influential Home Affairs Select Committee between 2007 and 2016. He was appointed as Vice Chair of the Parliamentarians for Diabetes Global Network in October 2017 and has been Chairman of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Diabetes since 2015. As I say, I will introduce all four speakers and then we'll go back to the individuals to speak. So our second speaker is Dr. Fiona Campbell, and she is a consultant diabetes paediatrician at Leeds Children's Hospital. Her service looks after 450 patients between 0 and 20 years, and she has a special interest in the use of technologies, but you're still going to stick to professionals, for instance, in integrating their use into routine clinical practice. So I'm told that 60% of your patients use insulin pumps, 30% continuous glucose monitoring, and over 25% use the Freestyle Libre system. She's been the chair of the National Children and Young People's Diabetes Network in England and Wales for the last 8 years. Our third speaker is Max Davey. Max is a consultant community paediatrician. He works in Lambeth as part of the Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Trust Community Services. He's a special clinical interest in the assessment and diagnosis of neurodevelopmental conditions in school-aged children. He recently became the Officer for Health Promotion at the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, where he's working on population health issues, including mental health and obesity. And our final speaker, trying to drag that pitiful 4 votes up to a little bit higher, is Mayank Patel. Mayank is a consultant in diabetes and senior clinical lecturer at Southampton Hospitals Trust, and I should declare an interest. I'm a board member of that particular trust, but it won't affect the voting, I assure you. He's worked at the hospital since 2008 and has overhauled and developed our adult inpatient diabetes services. He regularly gives teaching sessions to patients, professionals, and other healthcare professionals, and actually co-developed the MicroGuide. I think some of you who were in this talk earlier will have seen the MicroGuide Diabetes, which is a smartphone application to help healthcare professionals managing people with diabetes. He's also, with Partha, the co-author of the comic. So the T1 Origins comic that we've had out for a little while now, and then as yesterday, version 2 or edition 2 or volume 2, which is T2 Ketones. So those comic books are also Mayank's part creation. So we've got 4 excellent speakers, I think you'll agree, and now I'm going to hand over to Keith. The plan is 5 minutes max for each speaker, and then we'll move on to yourselves taking part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. I declare my interest as someone with type 2 diabetes, and I come to this conference for the second time, full of praise for the work of Maggie Mears and her team. I think this is an excellent way in which policymakers can come together with professionals and users such as myself. I am not in competition with the other 3 people on the panel. I like them all, and I respect their position, but I want you to vote for me. I want you to vote for me because despite the fact that they all have a big contribution to play in dealing with issues such as childhood obesity, at the end of the day, unless you have policy and law, you cannot change people's habits. Yes, it would be great to be able to go to your family meal and have everyone banter about what people should eat and what people should drink. But actually, at the end of the day, if the law provides for this, if the policymakers make decisions, then people have to follow what is being done. I give you just 3 very simple examples. The first is the sugar tax. I've been campaigning for the sugar tax along with many others for many years. And people said that when George Osborne introduced it, it would make absolutely no difference. But it has. I have visited the headquarters of some of the biggest drinks manufacturers in the world, and they are terrified of the sugar tax. They have changed the formula for their product to ensure that they reduce sugar, and therefore they pay less tax. If it wasn't for that legislation and that policy decision, they would not have made those changes. And at the end of the day, not eating sugar, not consuming sugar means you reduce the prospects of obesity, especially childhood obesity, and indeed diabetes. Second quick example, labeling. I've just been to a conference in Brent this morning. I picked up a bar of chocolate. I checked on it, and there was a very clear label that there was no added sugar, and it had been endorsed by SugarWise as a product that I could eat. I am a chocoholic. I'm addicted to chocolate, and I don't like diabetic chocolate. But actually, I checked before I ate, and I was very clear that I was able to do this because of a policy decision concerning labeling. And the final example is policy decisions such as when manufacturers advertise, after the watershed, when you're trying to sell products. It worked with smoking by banning advertising. It will work with obesity. But unless you have policymakers making this difference and making these decisions, none of the other aspects, though they are wonderful, friendly people, none of them can have the kind of impact as policy and government. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very interesting view on policy. I'm afraid that I don't agree with this view on policy. I feel that what about all these people out there who are unable to communicate with the paper policy that it's written on, that where English potentially is not their first language, and the first thing they do is not to read packets and look at whether it's suitable for high sugar, low sugar. They cannot benefit from this. Can I take you back to the days when I started training, where we started talking about child protection? It wasn't everybody's business a few years back, and we had specialists that just wanted to focus on protecting children. Nowadays, child protection is everybody's business. And as professionals, we're taught from the very start of our training that really we should be looking through all the issues that we see as professionals in the interface between families and young people about looking for symptoms and signs of protecting young people. And for me, obesity is a child protection issue. And if we're all trained in looking out for child protection, then it becomes a professional responsibility to also look out for childhood obesity. Because childhood obesity kills people early. Childhood obesity causes problems with ongoing young adult and adult health. Obesity causes massive mental health issues in young people who suffer from it. And we as professionals have a responsibility to make every contact count. And we think back to all the contacts that the people in the room will have, or any other professionals in the life of an embryo, right the way through to being born, through preschool, through high school, through college, university, and working life. They always have contact with professionals in the health sphere. They always have contact with everybody who knows about health. And surely it's our responsibility that every contact counts. Every time we identify somebody that's as either overweight or obese or at risk of, or in a family situation where what happens can be influenced, then we need to treat it as a child protection issue and you rescue them from the doom of obesity. So policy for me is, of course, it's important, but please consider obesity as child protection and treat it with the seriousness that it deserves. Thank you very much.
Hello. Now, I work in Lambeth in South London. Some of you may be aware of it, London's angriest borough. I'm not going to talk about Lambeth today. I'm going to talk about Southwark, our sister borough, about which I've found an interesting fact about its epidemiology. Down at the bottom of Southwark, you have Dulwich. We just click on. What I've done is put up the first Google image that comes up for the two places. I can get on my bike, and in 10 minutes, I can be in Camberwell. And that's the first Google image for Camberwell. Dulwich has a 10% rate of childhood obesity. Camberwell, 30%. So the question is why? First thing you might say is, well, are people better, that's Dulwich College, obviously, are people better educated in Dulwich? Perhaps. But there's two reasons to think why education is not the whole story. The first is something that I've never heard. I've never heard, thank you, doctor, I didn't know that preventing childhood obesity was a simple matter of eating less and exercising more. I will definitely put that in place. Has anyone ever heard that? So the basics everyone knows. And the second is, I'm afraid, that interventions based on education have got a pretty poor evidence base. They're disappointing, and we need to move on to the next phase. So the second thing is, well, let's look at the place. Dulwich is packed with safe, open, publicly accessible spaces. Cycling in Dulwich is a dream. Cycling in Camberwell, a little bit more, taking your life in your own hands. The other thing about the place is, what's the biggest shop? Well, shops in Camberwell, you've got betting shops and you've got chicken shops. Those are the big shops. How many chicken shops in Dulwich? Not so many chicken shops, except, of course, you get Pizza Express, which you can buy chicken at, of course. So the access to fast food, and Keith has already brought up exposure to fast food advertising, is very much higher in these, let's stop beating around it, poorer areas. The thing is, in obesity, we are making progress among the more affluent areas. Where we are failing is in poorer areas. That's where the increase is, and that's where the gap is growing year on year between the more well-off and the less well-off. So we need to look at poverty. Why does poverty produce obesity? Several reasons. One, cheap food can be healthy. Cheap, convenient food is seldom healthy. If I go into Tesco's Metro with £1, I can buy 5 donuts and 2 and a bit apples. If I've got 5 hungry children, which am I going to buy? Okay? A lot of the families that I work with, the cooking facilities are rubbish where they live. They're in temporary housing. They might have a single ring. You cannot do a lentil souffle. I don't know what a lentil souffle is. You know what I mean. Lentil souffle is even a thing. You can't do a healthy dal and lentils thing. I know dal is lentils, don't worry. With a single ring in temporary housing when you've got one room for the whole family. You know this. You work in the front line. Okay? Can't be done. But the most important thing is, I think, the psychological impact of poverty. And this is very well documented. When do you eat least healthily? When you are tired, when you are stressed, and when you are in a hurry. Now, we have this idea of poor people as not having jobs and having loads of time on their hands, but the majority of majority of poor families in this country work. They have less time than people who are better off. They get less sleep. And lack of sleep in both adults and children is linked with poorer eating habits. So improving sleep is an important thing. And of course, they have far higher levels of mental health difficulty. Just living, I mentioned temporary accommodation, just living in temporary accommodation gives you a 4-fold increase in child mental health problems. Don't worry, I'm there. So what to do? A lot of approaches to obesity are predicated and are based on willpower. But we know, really, that willpower is contextual. Willpower depends on your context. I'm slightly cheating, and I've already won, which is wonderful, thank you, by giving you a framework. But I seriously think all decisions around obesity need to be put through the framework of, well, how will it affect the family context?
Too long.
So thank you very much.
Right, hopefully last but not least, I had only 4 votes, so I'm tugging at heartstrings, going to the sympathy vote, if nothing else. Top-down policy, okay, yes, it might reach some people, but it won't reach everybody. So what we need is a real grassroots take on this. Hence, the case for technology, I feel, in reducing the risk of child obesity is quite compelling and quite strong. I think you'll all agree every child deserves to feel loved, get the right start in life, and feel supported. Sorry. And if for a moment with technology, I think about screen time, whilst I appreciate many negatives made about screen time, if we think about the positives in this context, it can be an inclusive family affair if we let it. So, for example, we talk about social media and a screen. There are relevant resources out there, such as YouTube, where one could learn to make lentil souffle, for example, and learn from the best at doing it, and share that at scale with others. Relevant, credible people could champion the cause on your behalf and give you some support in your own home. So whereas most homes will have a screen, I suspect a lot of homes will not have fresh food, as our friend has alluded to, but screens are there for sure. So if we think of those as a force for good, I'm thinking, for example, we have video games such as Wii Fit type devices where the individual has to reduce some physical activity. You can introduce some competitive element to that. There are dance mats where kids can learn to dance and keep active. These are fun, competitive things and could promote the sort of family gel type environment and share sort of results and who's won, bit of gamification, which kids might get into, that sort of thing, who's on the most steps, that sort of thing. On a more serious note, we recognise there are young children out there who have special education and learning needs. And for them, life is quite challenging already, and we know that's a high-risk group for becoming obese in childhood and beyond. And for these individuals, we know even leaving the house can be a real challenge for their parents in some situations. So if we are able to persuade the use of screens appropriately, I feel it's a definite way forward with the right resource and the right structure around it. In terms of things like smartphone applications, I know from experience my 6-year-old loves going to the supermarket with me, scanning barcodes, looking at sugar content. Bit of fun, bit of tech, bit of gamification in that process, and he enjoys that around the value of food and healthy eating. So there's ways of embedding messages in everyday process and raising sugar awareness, as our friends have already mentioned. Physical activity-wise, again, tech has its place to play. Who here has heard of something called Pokemon Go? Yeah, so again, could be a family affair, kids out there with a phone looking for Pikachus and whatnots out and about, getting to know their area, getting active, doing something in their local environment. There's something similar called geocaching, I believe, where you can go out hunting, looking for rewards in boxes and all sorts with family and friends. And more close to home in most people's cities, most cities have now got a park run and a junior park run. So you can engage parents, kids, go for a run, walk, hop, whatever, but get out together and keep active as a family unit. So rather than persuading 5-year-olds to join Twitter and tweet and Instagram their meal choices, I'm not advocating, I think making child obesity using tech a family affair is really important. And for young kids who are already using Libre devices and pumps, that has already been transforming child diabetes experiences for those who have diabetes, but in the context of obesity, we definitely need much more family-focused support, which should start at home at a grassroots level. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all 4 speakers who put a compelling case and kept well within their time. Now, it's over to you. Mark Dooman has a roving mic. I'd like to see a whole series of hands. What we want you to do is say, what do you think? Question, hassle the panel as much as you like, and let's try and get some debate going so we can dig underneath some of the headlines that we've had there. Who's going to start? You need one person, and then we usually get to see hands. There's a person here on my right, your left, Mark. So it might be easy if you stand up, it seems to amplify the voice much more clearly.
I acknowledge that politics has a part to play, but anybody that's read Gary Taubes' Good Calories, Bad Calories knows the devastation that happened in America with the change in advice about saturated fat. People do follow government advice. People have changed their diet. They have changed their exercise regime in line with government policy, and that's resulted in the obesity epidemic and diabetic epidemic that we have currently. When I was 6, I was told by the classroom assistant that I was fat and that I couldn't go on the rocking horse, and tut, 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 what was my mother doing? The year before, my grandmother had been told to go on a low-carbohydrate diet. Why, 62 years later, am I doing what I should have been taught when I was 6?
Okay, thank you very much. That's partly a vote for policy, but more importantly, right policy. There's a hand here at the front here, please, Mark. Just on my side, at the front row.
There are 2 things.
You might have to stand up and get close to the mic.
Could be family.
Mike, could they give us their names?
Yes, actually, that would be helpful. If you tell us your name and actually your organisation.
Okay, my name is Rose. I'm a practice nurse working in East London.
Okay, and keep
So
the microphone nice and close to you.
So I know what it means to be obese, 2 things. Policy, the industry as well as families. As the doctor rightly said, if you have only 1 ring, how can you cook? It is even more expensive to buy food, take away all the time than cooking, because you can buy 1 chicken, which may be just 3 pounds, and you cook and the whole entire family will eat with rice. But then, it is easier for them just to go. Children these days are not, the parents don't even cook. Even if they have 4 plates, they don't cook. It's just easy for them to buy, take away, and they sit at home and eat. Weekends, they go out and eat in the restaurant. Okay, the industry is not helping. The government can sing till their kingdom come. They don't even reduce the fat content, sugar content, everything. Okay, Burger King, they keep adding 1 layer they add cheese, uh, 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 whatever layers, about 20 layers for one person to eat. You cannot burn the calories at all, even if you were, unless you are an athlete running every day.
Okay.
Schools are not provided with playgrounds. You cannot go anywhere, the bicycle will knock you down. So I don't know how.
I think that's probably a vote for a family environment. Some more hands. These to Charles. One, yes, you can go heading. Mark, did you see the one at the back as well? And then there's Charles here.
In regards to the policy, I'm really happy
Sorry,
about the way...
could you just introduce yourself and your organisation? Just give a bit of context. Thank you.
I'm Grace Yabwesiama. I'm with Day Webster. And then...
Okay, and keep nice and close to the microphone. Pretend you're a pop star.
Yeah, in regards to the policy, I do like the content of it most. However, I'm thinking of the labeling. Someone stressed that how are people going to read? I think if we can add many language to it as well, many people will be able to read it and it will help. That is the health education which starts from the home and everywhere, and it affects us as well.
Okay. I think that's a vote for several, actually, because the language issue might be something that technology could help with as well. Okay. We have another lady at the back, please. Ready to go?
My name is Anna van der Pooy, Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. I think we need more playgrounds. All our playgrounds are being taken over by buildings. And our buildings are so close together. High-rise buildings, which we got rid of a couple of years, have popped up all over London. Our children cannot have anywhere to go out and play. So parents are forced to buy games, and children sit at home in front of games, televisions, just to play games. No wonder they are putting on more weight and getting obese. We need playgrounds round the place. Every little land that we have is being taken over by buildings. The mayor of London has even said you could build buildings behind your houses to let them out to people to stay in. So all the little lands we have round the communities in London especially have houses on them now. Our children can't find anywhere to play. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I
Charles?
just say, Mike, that I'm happy for everybody to move to Scotland. That would be really nice. We've got plenty of room up there, so come up north. Right.
So Charles had his hand up. What we'll do, we'll take 3 more maximum, and then we'll go back to the panel for a response from what they've heard up to now.
Thank you very much. Charles Fox from Northampton. Now, I'm a policy man. I think this is probably the one example where top-down actually works. And most of the things we've heard about, like poverty, playgrounds, these are all policy that can be changed by policy. I'd like to ask the panel, perhaps in their summing up, to talk about real evidence for things. Max has already said that the evidence for education is very poor. I think the evidence for policy is there. I've heard of a French small town where the whole town has changed its eating habits. Now, is that policy? I suppose it is. Anyway, that's my question to the panel. What is the evidence for their particular, the thing they're supporting?
Okay, we'll have 2 more, and then we'll go to the panel and get a response on that. Yes, okay.
Thank you. My name's Tara. I'm a dietitian at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital working in adolescent weight management. And this is, I suppose, more so for you, Fiona. I partly agree that obesity can be a child protection issue. And I have myself raised that many times with social services, with certain families. I suppose my comment or my question is if we were to raise every child with obesity as a child protection issue, there would be no resources. There's just simply not enough social services to be able to cope with raising all these children. And then the question is, if it is a child protection issue, what are they actually supposed to do?
Yeah.
Okay, did everybody hear that, by the way? It was effectively, yeah, you did. Okay. There's another lady in the same row, just at the very end there. If you raise your hand again.
Hi.
We'll have other names anyway.
My name is Dita Beth. I'm from Cornwall, and I'm a stroke nurse. And in Cornwall, we have lots of fields to kids too. I have 2 kids. And my question is, no, it's about policy, I think. I think we need to teach our children how to cook so that there's a lot of people which includes me, don't know how to cook very well. I'm Asian. People expect that I can do a lot of cooking, but I'm not. So I just maybe teach parents or like how to cook, and maybe teach the new generation how to cook and to how to know about finances, so that to prepare them in the future. Because now we're just dealing with whatever now.
Okay, Mark, we'll take one more on the front row just while we're all here at the front, and then we'll go to the panel to get some comments.
Hello, my name is Ori. I work with Friendly Park Health. In support to what this lady just said, I'm on the side of family tackling childhood obesity, because it's something that can be reproduced worldwide. If you talk about policy, you talk about technology, some third world countries are struggling with electricity. So when you talk about technology, it's not something that can easily be reproduced. And policy making will take a long time, but having family time and cooking, having family time and making homemade food will go a long way to reduce childhood obesity. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go into the panel. I'll go in the order that you spoke. So Keith, Fiona, Max, and then Mayank. Keith, your thoughts on some of the things you've heard up to now and responses?
I think that we have Gracie, Annabelle, Charles, Elizabeth all saying in their contributions the kinds of lifestyle changes, the kinds of policy changes that they would like to see. In Elizabeth's case, she wants to see the curriculum changed, so at schools people have the opportunity, young people have the opportunity of learning how to cook, which I never did, because most kids, when they go to school, most parents want them to do their grades. They don't necessarily want them to do other things. And this is a very important part of the future of people's lives and the way in which they live, to give them that kind of change. Charles said he believes in top-down. Where is the evidence? I think the evidence is the sugar tax. People were aghast when it was announced and thought it was a public relations gimmick by the then Chancellor. But actually, it's made a huge difference to people's lives, and you have to just go and visit one of these companies like Suntory, who make Ribena, to see the efforts that they have made to come below the benchmark so they don't pay tax. This is the thing they're most worried about, paying tax. So it does make a difference, and that's the evidence. The other evidence, of course, and I use this as an example, which is smoking. I mean, we've still got a room in the House of Commons called the smoking room, but nobody's allowed to smoke there. Because it's where they all went there to plot against how to get rid of the prime ministers of the day. I'm not bringing Brexit into this conversation. But nobody can smoke there. And the vast change to our health service, to cancer rates, to the National Health Service as a result of a policy change because of the way in which we dealt with smoking, convinces me, and I think Gracie, Annabelle, Charles, Elizabeth, that things do need to change policy-wise. The one point that Oren made, which I think is absolutely right, it takes too long. It takes too long to change policy. And that must be much quicker. But at the end of the day, it is peer group pressure as well. So I'm also on the side of families and the environment here. I think that's got a big role to play. What other people eat within your family context. Very important. But of course, if mum and dad are not at home because of their working hours and they don't get flexi time to be at home with their kids, they can't be cooking for their children and enjoying all the family arrangements. It's policy that will allow mums and dads to be able to be and spend more time with their children, to enable them to do the things, Oren, that you want them to do. Okay. But peer pressure and family pressure is very important.
Okay, so we haven't quite changed Keith's mind yet. Fiona?
So, all very interesting, but we have to be brave to tackle the issue. We have to be in a position where we don't hold back when we see something we know isn't right. And in child protection terms, we're often afraid to tackle what we know isn't right because of the consequences of doing so. And what I really want to do is urge our audience to always act in the best interest of the child. That, by definition, is child protection, making decisions and helping families take decisions to protect the well-being of children at every opportunity. So, of course, from a healthcare professional perspective, we're uniquely placed to very often challenge what families are doing, to actually then say, well, is this a child in need? And clearly obese children are children in need. They need a change to their environment. They need a change to the way people approach them, speak to them, care for them. All of what everybody has said is absolutely contributing to that agenda, but the healthcare professional is uniquely placed to make changes happen by interpreting the environment for the family and encouraging them to take on board everybody's efforts. So what I would say is child protection does not need to be the social services department using the resource there. It just needs to be us as a healthcare professional body identify where things are not right, where the child is put at significant risk, both short-term, medium-term and long-term, and we're brave enough to tackle the issue and not just sweep it under the carpet. So this does not need to be resource intensive. It needs to be a change of mindset in the healthcare professionals to be brave and speak out and tackle the issue and to help the families get to the resources they require to make a significant change to behaviour. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. You'll notice actually before we come to environment, we've made the environment a weight loss environment here by putting the temperature up to about 45 degrees centigrade. But bear with us, I'm sure it's good for us in some way. So, Max.
I just want to pick up a point about child protection. I think it's really important to clarify, and Fiona has clarified, that she doesn't mean that 30% of children in Camberwell need to be referred to social services, because you're quite right, that's totally unrealistic. So if you're not going to refer them to social services, then you say, okay, we've got to do something about this. And I don't think as health professionals we are sweeping this under the carpet. We think this is a really important issue. But what isn't appropriate is to point the finger and blame families, because often they're doing the best they can in the circumstances that they're in. And what we need to do is change the environment in which families are happening, to tackle child poverty, to improve our spaces. I can't remember who it was who said about playgrounds. Absolutely right. There isn't the outside spaces where children feel safe, families feel safe to send them out to, so that they can have the exercise they need. And also, Keith is absolutely right that the labelling, by the way, the labelling doesn't necessarily need to be multilingual because it's often colour-based. So if you know if it's a red light, you don't necessarily need to have language to understand that. So that's fine. But the labelling is important. So it's all important. If, as I agree to an extent, I would say that obesity is a public health emergency and therefore is a very high priority. But it doesn't mean that individually we should be blaming and castigating parents. Partly, it doesn't work. It makes them defensive and it doesn't affect change. Teaching people to cook is great, but on its own, it doesn't work. We know it doesn't work unless you change the environment in which families are living. So tackling poverty, tackling open spaces, tackling the food industry, all very important stuff. It is an emergency, but I don't think pointing fingers is helpful.
Mayank, our Twitter feed actually has got 27 recipes for lentil soufflés, so it's certainly working in some way.
Thank you.
I've invented a dish.
We'll treat us after the meeting's finished. Thank you. Essentially, I still feel that technology is a great enabler in all of this situation of childhood obesity. I mean, we're not going to reinvent the wheel and sort everything out in one hit, sort out playgrounds and social care in one go. But as I mentioned earlier, there are screens in many houses. This is a device, a phone, a tablet in many places already in someone's home. The thought of exercise going outside for some people is a step too far and they'll never do it, and you can't change behaviour. But a device enabled with appropriate resource, appropriate education in different languages, colour-coded, traffic-lighted, whatever, in a way the individual situation will work for them, that's phenomenal. Leaflets through front doors, literacy is variable, so an online resource, again, can be very visual for people who are visual learners, more than those who read, for example. And someone mentioned video games, and yes, I agree, there are some games out there you can just sit there and gain weight, but there are others, for example, the virtual reality-based idea where you can be immersed in a different world, be on your feet, doing something, etc., competing with family members, etc., introducing some gamification can bring reward. And with planning, why not let these devices time out after a certain interval for an X amount of time so that someone can't sit there for hours playing the same thing? That might be a way of mitigating sitting there for too long, for example. And in terms of evidence, I appreciate this is a relatively new idea, so I'm not aware of any major trials that have shown this, but we've got to start somewhere. It's something in people's homes already. Let's do a pilot. Let's get some grassroots evidence. It's got legs at the very least, and take things from there.
Okay, Mike, thank you. Let's have some more hands up in the air, and let's get some more participation from the audience. And Mark, while you're walking down, you had a view as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I was going to say I'm a type 2 diabetic, and I use the word diabetic. I lost a couple of stone, and that's been driven by a health psychology model. So that's been looking at my 7-year-old daughter and saying, you know what, I'd like to be here in 20 years' time. So despite being in the medical model and talking about HbA1c and metformin and all the rest of it, that never really worked for me. And what I haven't heard yet enough from the panel, I've heard you talk around it, but do we really get inside patients and the public's head and heart before we start focusing on technology and what's in their hands? Because unless you understand what my health beliefs are and what my medicine's beliefs are and my level of motivation, it doesn't matter which of the 4 aspects you're talking about, you ain't necessarily going to change my behavior. So what role does health psychology perhaps play in this?
Okay, we'll come back to that in a collective, so we'll have a few more hands. There's one right at the very back as well, Mark, in the standing cheap seats.
Hi, my name's Rob. I'm a local registrar. I'll try not to take too long, but I initially voted for family, but then as I sat here, I started thinking more about technology. So at the moment, we have to face it, everything is going in the direction of technology. You have Amazon Go for convenience, all those stores where you literally go in, you pick stuff up, and you leave. More stores are going into this whole RFID labeling of their products, so you can make a list on your phone and it will direct you where to go in terms of walking around the store to pick up the items. So is there not a way that you can work with the stores to say, okay, once you've made your list, it flags up the sugar content, gives you alternatives for what you could pick, and kind of help with that in that respect? I think that's another option, because at least you always make a list before you go shopping. If it's all electronic, it gives you alternatives, and then that's where, like, is it possible for stores to work with, professionals to try and develop that a bit more?
Okay, thank you. There's a lady at the very, very back, Mark. You're practically going to exit before you get to her.
Can I also suggest that if you pick up a Mars bar, you get an electric shock? Would that work?
Hello, I'm Sharon, Service Improvement Facilitator from Bristol, CCG. Just to say, about 12 or 13 years ago, the Foresight report came out on obesity, and it was a brilliant report. It was completely multifaceted, looking at the whole approach that we should be taking to obesity, looking at individuals and obviously supporting individuals, but about the environment and policy that needs to support an environment that helps us to actually make those healthy choices, and also within the context of social deprivation, because we can't ignore that evidence that there is a really strong correlation. So I guess my vote is sort of policy and family together. It has to be a system approach, otherwise we won't be able to tackle it. So.
Okay, we knew there was one person who pressed 2 buttons simultaneously, almost broke it, but now we know who they are. Okay, some more hands, please. There's one just on your left, Mark, and then there's one a bit nearer the front, same side.
Just a couple of short
Could you say
comments.
who you are again in your
sorry,
organisation?
I'm Sharon McIntyre.
Okay.
Just a short thing about the sugar tax. It's doing well for the aspartame crew, because everything's now got aspartame in, which doesn't do very much good for the asthmatics. When it comes to people and their homes, it's fine to have technology, but I'd prefer to eat than get an Xbox. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. There's a hand here, Mark, sort of your same side, 4 rows from the front. If people want to put their next hand after this one up, then we can get Mark to run as far as possible.
Yeah, it's good. It's reducing my diabetes, isn't it?
Hi, my name's Joe Alvarez. I'm a dietitian at Whittington Health in North London. So there's a couple of comments really I want to make. As a dietitian, I hear a lot that it's too expensive to buy healthy food. I'm sure other people have heard that too. It's too expensive to eat healthy, fruit's too expensive. So that's kind of, I suppose, a policy, a vote for the policy side of things. that shouldn't be the case, that it's too expensive to eat healthy, and actually people are saying that it's cheaper, to go and buy a takeaway than it is to go and, buy ingredients for a healthy meal. Another comment I wanted to make, I grew up in Clacton, which is the most deprived town in the UK, so I've seen firsthand, the issues that deprivation causes. So I think one of the biggest problems is education. And actually, if people understood health and the importance of eating healthy and living a healthy lifestyle, and if they understood that from a young age, maybe that would actually make things. Obviously, that's going to take time. But obviously, the issue is that the parents are feeding their children, so they're the ones that need to, understand. These health messages.
Okay, I think it was a couple behind you, so actually there might be just pass it direct. No, okay, that won't work. Okay, there were two hands just about 2 rows behind that gentleman.
Thank you, Mark. It's good exercise for you. I do like Scotland, actually. Maybe one day we should move. Oh, star jumps. Thank you for the panel. It's excellent speakers. They all are excellent. I'm sure you agree with each other. You are equally important, maybe some more than the others. Thank you for the policymakers. You make the flexible working hours possible. I think that's grateful for working parents. It's important. However, about the sugar tag, I know it made influences. However, if people hasn't got the education, they're looking at label about Ribena you mentioned, have the lighter version. If they're drinking triple amount than they normally do, as normal concentrated nutrition, what do they gain? It's about the education and also about family. If the parents hasn't got the education to give to the kids don't know what is better. They like sugar. I think the human behavior make you happy. So it's equally important also about the screen time. We all have a smartphone, tablets. They do wonderful job to a certain extent. And also about professional impacts, as we all are. So I think equally important. I might press 4 button next time.
Yes, I was going to say, now we found the person who pressed all 4.
Thank you.
Okay, can we have one more hand and then we'll actually go back to the panel for comments. There is one here at the front. No, there's one already there. Okay, and then we'll come to you and then we'll go. Okay.
My name's Jane. I'm practice nurse in Lewisham. They've introduced an incentive scheme where I work that when we do a preschool booster at 3 years and 4 months, we have to check the weight, height and BMI centile. And then there's this sort of algorithm saying if it's above something, you refer them for sort of advice. And yet there's nowhere to send them. It's a sort of policy thing that's been made at a local level. We have emails backwards and forwards, where do we send them? Finally, we've heard about the MEND programme, but looking into it, you can only refer from the age of 5. So as healthcare professionals, we can do a lot, but if you've got nowhere to refer them, you need sort of policies to enforce these services.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a hand here, Mark, and your right, second row, as far as possible, but it might be good for you to come all the way around the front and maybe
I was going to say, if that lady, she can send them to Scotland as well.
Hi, my name's Charlotte Gordon. I'm a nursing academic from Northumbria University. I just wanted to touch on the point about playgrounds and play spaces. So I live in the northeast of England, and it's in an area that's got some deprivation and some wealth, like the area you talked about. And I just wanted to say, play spaces don't have to cost the earth, and a lot of it's about policy. So where I live, I run a street play every month, which basically involves shutting the street so that the children can come out and play. We started off with only a few streets in the area, and it's grown and grown through social media. So it's policy, it's social change, and it's also the use of social media. Every month we have more streets coming out to play. It started off in Bristol, and I believe it happens around the country, but it's been really successful for us, and it's actually being evaluated by Newcastle University at the moment. And I do think that it's a really positive change with relation to childhood obesity, and it doesn't cost the earth, it just costs time.
Okay, thank you. Mark.
And can I just add a personal insight? So I'm part of a synagogue in Manchester, despite the funny Scottish accent. There's 200 men in there. 80 of us are probably obese. One of the things I'm thinking about is what's my responsibility as an ex-pharmacist, as a patient with diabetes, to do some sort of similar community development, because that peer-to-peer, that asset-based community stuff often works better. And again, I think we've touched around the issue, but where can we perhaps look a little bit at allowing and empowering communities to do stuff for themselves and looking outwards, not always looking upwards?
Okay, can we go back to the panel? 1 minute max each, then we'll go out once more. We're going to start at the far end. Mayank, any thoughts on anything you've heard just recently?
Something mentioned about making a choice between having an Xbox or eating. I mean, that's kind of, no one would accept that would be the choice you'd be faced with in real life. So all I was suggesting was that if there are screens already out there, let's just embrace what's already in someone's home rather than investing in new games consoles if not necessary. And I take your point about the psychology of the parents. I mean, call me old-fashioned, but I'd hope that most parents have children with a view to watching their children grow old, happy and healthy, and be there and be part of that journey with them. And that sounds quite worthy, but I think it's important. So you're right, education does play a part, but the IT medium can be a good enabler for that. If mummy and dad are working shifts and long hours, getting to a course is not going to fly for them, whereas something online accessible they can learn from as a family, I think may have legs.
Max.
Thank you for Mark and our colleague from Lewisham for mentioning treatment, essentially. I am very passionate about prevention, as you've probably guessed, but eventually we will need to start to have treatment services, and the treatment services for childhood obesity in the UK are generally woeful. There's no stepped care. There's often nothing between the primary care universal services and the very specialist often surgical options for adolescents. There's very, very poor planning and commissioning of obesity services in the UK, and that definitely does need to be addressed. But we need to know what works. So, just slightly challenging here. The Wii Fit has been mentioned a few times.
Or a version of.
There's no evidence that Wii Fit actually is better than video gaming, conventional video gaming for calorie expenditure or for preventing obesity. So we want something combining screen interaction and exercise is in theory a good idea, but we need to know interventions that we know work.
Okay. Fiona.
So just to go back to what I've said every single time, this is everybody's business and we can all contribute. And we haven't to get into the game of referring on and referring on and referring on, because as you rightly know, there is nowhere sometimes to refer to. So as professionals, we're in the position of learning as much as we can and using our skills and usually our respect within the general population to influence behavior, to allow them to have information and help them interpret that, and to facilitate them learning to change their behavior to the good of the child that is at risk and is vulnerable and knows no better. So this is the important thing about child protection. It is to think about it as everyone's business and to act if you think a child is at risk from the devastating consequences of being overweight and obese. Because when it starts in childhood, the evidence is that it stays with you almost forever. And it takes a very special person behavior to change. So child protection, get in there at the start, skill yourself up, but don't hold back about intervening and help the families get what they need.
Keith.
Very good comments, very good ideas. Love the idea of shutting your local street and having street parties. We only do it normally if there's a royal wedding or somebody is 90 or whatever. We didn't do it for Prince Charles, he was 70 yesterday. But I think this kind of community action is very important, but you still need to have the local council who have to agree policy-wise to close your roads. Otherwise you can't do it. So you need that kind of policy framework, but that kind of action is very important. What Mark has just told us, I remember when I didn't want to go on an extra metformin tablet, and I didn't want to go on a statin, and I said, I'm doing 6 in the morning to my GP. He said, fine. Well, you will die 5 years early then. And I said, okay, I'll have it. I need those 5 years. I haven't finished what I want to do with my life. So that kind of shock tactic is extremely important if we're going to get people to realize how important their health is. Andrew was telling me, I'm not trying to out Andrew here, that his diet has resulted in his reversal of diabetes, which is individuals taking this into their hands. Gerard was saying, Whittington Hospital, Gerard, he was talking about the need for more emphasis to be put on diet. But this can only come with a framework of policy making. But policies have to be implemented. You can have 1,000 documents on childhood obesity. If they are not turned into law, and if guidance isn't given the force of the law, you're never going to get that change. So please, vote for policy.
Okay, so I'd like 2 comments, maybe a maximum of 3. We'll have a very quick summing up from the panel, and then we'll try and have votes with only one button being pressed by each person. Yes, there's a lady here, Mark. If you could be... stop relaxing, please. It's over here, this side, just there. And then if the next person could also raise their hand, we can give a bit of warning.
Hi, I'm Sharon, diabetes nurse from Watford. I originally voted for policy, but thank you for such amazing speakers. I'm now actually going to vote for technology. Because it's the only one where I see potential and possibility to actually help each sort of section to work together, especially having been in the hypo hub there and actually experienced one of the hypos. I think we need to be looking forward and seeing how we can learn to cook via technology, have apps that help professionals, psychology, sort of cognitive behavioural therapy, education. You know, there's loads of potential across the board, and then we can influence those policymakers as well. Thank you.
Okay, 2 more hands would be good. By the way, my apologies for the noise that appears to be coming from the front. It isn't my 10 helpings of fruit and veg. It is the cappuccino machine that's just to my right here. Okay, somebody surely can want to finish. There's a hand over there.
My name is Sophia. I'm a community dietitian based in Waltham Forest, and my comment, I guess, is towards technology and policy. Technology, we're in the era of technology. It's moving faster than we can think. Now, I have a Google Home. I don't even have to get up to turn off my lights. And I'm sure a lot of people here will have an app on their phone where it will take 2 taps. You can order a taxi, or 5 taps. You can order your dinner, and it will be getting to your home as soon as you get there. I guess we can move with technology. We can use it in a positive way, but in terms of with technology, we can use it in a positive way. With policy, can we get the restaurant and takeaway industry on board to show more about the nutritional content of calories and make people aware of the choices that they're making when they're eating out, either in a restaurant or when they're actually ordering food to come home to?
Okay, thank you very much. And going, there is a last opportunity for one more hand, one more comment, just to change the whole vote. It could be you single-handedly who changes. There's a hand over there with that very small challenge to single-handedly change the vote. Gentleman to your right, Mark. Yeah.
Can I just say on the technology front, I'm quite amazed. My wife just gives me 2 taps and I run off to the supermarket. I run off to the takeaway. So I'm really interested in getting this technology.
Grace Yabwa again, community nurse, Day Webster. I still go for policy because without policies embarking everything that we have spoken about this evening, it means that people will just be relaxed and not do what they're supposed to do. But with policies and with law and charges and penalty paying, then people will start doing things right, and it will help our community and our children with obesity as well.
Okay, right. I'm going to set the panel the impossible challenge, 10 seconds maximum each to finally get that last vote out. And I'm going to start with Max this time.
All of the areas that we've talked about have a role to play, but how do we decide what's good policy, what's bad policy, what's good tech, what's bad tech? It's family environment. If there acts on the family environment, if it changes the decision-making environment of the family, then it works. If it doesn't, it's a waste of time.
Your technology would have told you that was 13 seconds. Fiona.
Child protection, that you must think in the interests of vulnerable young people, intervene, use policy, use the family environment, use technology, but use child protection as the theme to get it right.
Keith.
You can have the best kind of ideas in the world, but unless you have the policy framework to put them into effect, they won't work. And putting that into that framework allows all the other areas to flourish. So we're all in this together, but at the end of the day, the bottom line is you have to have that policy framework. If you don't have it, You can't get the technology, you can't get the ability of families to get together and do the things they want to do, and you certainly can't protect our children.
Mayank.
So technology, access to a screen at least type device is available already in most homes. It's about using that responsibly, which means educating, which people can do en masse as a family group together at shared educational times using a screen responsibly.
Okay, right. Can we have the voting screen up again? And if you would get your lanyard-based devices. And you've got the, remember, it's policymakers A, professionals B, family environment C, technology D, one person left. We need to capture their vote. Could you vote now, please?
141, there's no chance of that. Keith won, there'll be a big swing to Keith.
Max knows he's going to win. He had the easy one.
We seem to be peaking, so we're going to count the votes now, okay?
Oh, there we go.
Well. Just to be clear, at the start, policymakers was 36, has moved to 83. Professionals was 11 and has moved to 9. Family environment 141 has gone to 72. Technology was 4 and has gone to 21. Could you all join me in thanking all the speakers and indeed your colleagues?